A cat found an abandoned baby between the train tracks, and what the animal did next left everyone amazed. Do you want to know what this cat did for the child? Then stay with me, and I will tell you this incredible story. Pedro lived in a small rural area. He had grown up there and loved his home and the beautiful rainforest that surrounded it. Throughout his childhood, Pedro loved exploring the woods, always discovering new and amazing things hidden within them. One of those things was an old train line that cut through a part of the forest. The line itself was inactive, and the tracks were covered in vegetation. So Pedro enjoyed visiting the tracks regularly to walk along them. One day, Pedro decided he wanted to revisit the abandoned tracks because it was a beautiful sunny day, perfect for a long walk in the forest. He packed a snack and set off into the woods, ready to get lost in nature. Little did he know that this day would change his life forever. And what was it? Well, you will find out soon enough. As Pedro walked along the train tracks, he observed and appreciated the peaceful landscape around him. But then, something unusual happened. He saw a shadow quickly pass by between the trees. Worried that it might be a jaguar or some other type of predator, Pedro immediately stopped and started paying closer attention to the trees around him. The shadow appeared again, but it was very small. Definitely too small to be a wild and dangerous animal. Thinking it might be a raccoon due to the shape of its tail, he decided to continue walking. He went just a little further along the tracks when he noticed something very strange. It seemed like the shadow was following him but keeping a certain distance. And we can agree that this is at least a little bit scary, right? Well, curious to know what strange creature it was, Pedro decided to stop and see if he could get closer. At first, he simply tried calling out to the animal in a gentle voice to see if it would respond. The creature stopped but remained within the tree line, advancing a few steps, until Pedro could make out what kind of animal was following him. It was a cat, and from the appearance of its tangled and unkempt fur, it seemed abandoned. Being an animal lover, Pedro didn't want to leave the lost feline alone in the forest. He knew there were predators in the woods that could easily capture and devour the small cat. The man began slowly approaching the frightened feline, calling it to encourage it to come closer to him. But when he was just a few meters away from the cat, he noticed something that shocked him. Pedro could see that the cat was a female because her mammary glands were swollen, which also meant she had a litter of kittens nearby. Surprised by the discovery, Pedro tried to get closer, but at the last moment, the cat suddenly ran further along the tracks. However, instead of leaving Pedro forever, the cat stopped and turned around, as if she was waiting for the man to follow her. Intrigued by what the cat wanted, Pedro began walking along the tracks in the same direction the feline was heading. The pair walked for a few minutes until Pedro suddenly started hearing something strange. It sounded like a baby's cry, and it was getting closer and closer. Finally, Pedro approached the animal cautiously, only to see that she was nestled with her litter of 3 kittens and, surprisingly, a baby. The man was very confused and worried. Why was this baby in the forest? Who had left it there? How long had it been alone with only the cat and her kittens to care for it? As these thoughts raced through his mind, Pedro quickly ran toward where the cat was lying to examine the child more closely. But as he tried to pick up the baby, the cat began to growl. It seemed that the feline had started to care for the baby as if it were one of her own kittens. Not knowing what to do, Pedro stepped back and simply watched the unusual family. The man knew he needed to reach the baby somehow because it wouldn't survive alone for much longer. But the mother cat didn't want him to approach. It was at this point that the man remembered the food in his backpack. The mother cat seemed quite thin, and since she had to take care of 3 kittens, she was certainly hungry. Maybe he could gain her trust by offering food. Pedro carefully took off his backpack so as not to startle the weary mother cat and grabbed the chicken sandwich he had prepared for himself. Instantly, the mother cat perked up at the sight and smell of the food. Pedro took a piece of chicken from the bread and slowly approached to be just a few meters away from the animal. He gently called her, encouraging the cat to take the meat. Hesitant at first, the mother cat got up, sniffed the piece of food that was offered. Then, cautiously, she took the meat from the man's hand and swallowed it in one go. With all the food gone, the scruffy little cat meowed at Pedro and rubbed against his hand, as if asking for more. Pedro laughed and gave her more chicken. After a few more bites, the cat seemed to have gotten closer to the man, and they started purring as they requested affection. Pedro happily obliged and began petting the kittens. Now that the cat seemed to trust him, Pedro decided to try reaching for the baby again. This time, the cat just watched as Pedro picked up the child in his arms. As soon as the man held the baby, the child stopped crying and looked at him. Now that he was closer, Pedro could see that the baby was a little girl and couldn't be more than a few weeks old. Shocked by the fact that someone could simply abandon such a defenseless baby, Pedro examined her head to make sure she was okay. Fortunately, besides a few scratches and minor bruises, the baby seemed to be healthy. The man stood up and started walking back along the tracks when he heard a meow. When he turned to look, Pedro saw that the mother cat was watching him. The man then looked at the animal and her kittens and knew he couldn't leave them to fend for themselves either. He turned back toward the felines and crouched down to pet the mother cat again, reassuring her that he would help her and her kittens. And once all the kittens were safe in the backpack, Pedro softly called the adult cat and started walking back to his village. The mother cat followed the man carrying her babies, and once everyone was safely back in the village, Pedro quickly put the kittens and the cat in his house before taking the baby to the nearest hospital. Upon arrival, the man explained to the doctor what had happened and how he found the baby thanks to the cat. The doctor was surprised by the story. After all, it's a story to marvel at, isn't it? He examined the baby before telling Pedro that she seemed to be healthy, except for being slightly dehydrated and hungry. Pedro was relieved and asked the doctor what would happen to the child. The doctor explained that she would be placed in temporary care while the police investigated to try to find her mother. But if no one was found, she would be put up for adoption. Pedro thanked the doctor and asked to be contacted if the child was put up for adoption. Next, he took the animals to the local veterinarian to have them examined as well and ensure that they were all healthy. Knowing that everything was fine, Pedro took the mother cat, whom he decided to call Mystique, and her kittens back home. A few months later, Pedro received a call informing him that no relatives of the girl he found had come forward, and she was being put up for adoption. The man immediately offered to adopt the girl, who had been named Chloe, and after signing all the legal paperwork, he became the proud father of an incredible little girl. And finally, the child was with her, as unusual as it may be. What do you think of this story? It shows how maternal love, both animal and human, can be capable of many things, including caring for a baby of a different species. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to learn about other incredible stories. Thank you for listening and watching, and until the next video.